I'd love to introduce Lena. It's really a special privilege because Lena and I worked together at Tandem Friend School, where we were both teachers, and she has always been an inspiration to me. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background. We're very fortunate to have Lena Lewis. She is the Energy and Climate Manager for the Nature Conservancy's Virginia chapter. And her advocacy work focuses on lowering air pollution through energy efficiency, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, and clean transportation. And Lena taught biology and environmental science at Tandem Friend School in Charlottesville for many years, and that's where we met one another. Before she shifted her professional efforts to tackling climate change. And she holds a master's degree in public policy from the Batten School of Leadership and Public Policy at the University of Virginia, and a bachelor's degree in biology from Swarthmore College. So thank you, Lena, for being here and sharing your expertise and all of your insights. We really look forward to hearing from you.
And Christine, you've always inspired me too, and you continue to inspire me. So thanks for inviting me tonight. So, and it's great to see some familiar faces and names on the screen and to see some new ones. So great to be here. And I am going to start with, I'm going to put a question up here. It always does this where it puts this like band right over the part where I'm able to like start my slideshow. So there we go. I'm going to ask this question again later in the slideshow, but I wanted you to start thinking about it now, and then you can put it in the back of your mind or the front of your mind while I'm talking about other things. And anyway, the question is, what climate action, clean energy, or clean transportation project would you install locally if money were not an obstacle? And I put that there because we now have a lot of federal money that will be coming down from above that will be such that money will not be an obstacle. And some things will be possible. And I think it'll be such that it's going to take people at the local level saying, I have a project in mind, and I'm going to apply for this federal grant. And then it's going to be a matter of finding the right federal grant to apply for. And then you can make it happen. So we'll get to that later in the presentation. So let me just find the right button here. Okay. This title is like the longest title I've ever come up with, but I had a lot of different topics as Diana and Christine and I were talking about what we wanted to go over tonight. So energy efficiency in electric vehicles, why state policy matters, and how federal dollars can make your local climate dreams come true. So let me tell you a little bit about the Nature Conservancy, first of all. We are a global organization, and we envision a future where people and nature thrive. We work in over 70 countries, and we have, over 400 scientists on staff, but we have over 4,000 staff members around the world. And we have protected over 125 million acres of land worldwide. In Virginia, we have protected over 500,000 acres. And you can see each of these dots represents a place in Virginia where we are working. Some of these areas we own. Some of these areas other people own and we are managing it. Some where we have easements, we have contracts with other people where they have a contract where they've agreed never to develop that land. And we also work in partnership with federal and state agencies to protect the land as well. Some of the places that we work are publicly accessible. So if you go to our webpage, nature.org/Virginia, and you scroll down till you see this picture and click on it, it'll take you to a map where you can find our preserves. And when you're traveling elsewhere, you can find them, and you can go take a hike or a stroll, and there's some really beautiful places. So I really invite you to enjoy our properties. So we're doing all of this incredible work. My colleagues are like out there in the field doing all of this science and ecosystem restoration. And a lot of that work is improving the carbon sequestration of the ecosystems as they're making them healthier. And that's either like one of the direct priorities, or it's just happening anyway. But nature cannot do all of the carbon sequestration that is needed to fight climate change. We know that, like, even if we were to totally maximize ecosystems' ability across the world, even if agriculture was done very sustainably across the world, ecosystems would be able to get us about 30% of the way towards the Paris Climate Agreement goals. So mitigation, you know, the stopping of the pollution has to cover the other 70%. And that's the work that I'm doing at the state level. I'm trying to work on state level policy, advocating for state level policy to cut the carbon pollution across the different sectors. You know, I was thinking about this, you know, I think it was Tom who was saying, like, that question of how do you go from national to local. I think that's kind of what this diagram is about. This diagram in a different context could be, you know, it could be a very comforting thing as you think about, like, the individual nested in these different levels of community. But I put it here to talk about how these different levels of the system impact how effective we can be as individuals. Oh, and I'm seeing things in the chat, but I can't necessarily see the chat. Okay, they're just emails. Okay. So yeah, if you have something to say, I think just go ahead and come off mute to say it, because we're a small enough group that we can just do that, because I can't see the chat while I'm presenting. So anyway, so we have these different levels of the system, and sometimes the system can empower us, and sometimes it can constrain us. And when it comes to our ability to make a difference as an individual, as an environmental activist, sometimes I feel very constrained. Like, when I put something in the recycling bin, I don't know, in the system that I'm in, I don't have a lot of faith that it's going to actually get recycled. And likewise, as an individual in this system, if I want to get an electric vehicle, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's one available for me at the local dealership. Or if I want to use only renewable energy, that doesn't necessarily mean it's available to me. And that's the system that I'm in. And so, you know, one of the reasons that I wanted to go into public policy and into environmental advocacy was to change the system so that we could be more effective as individuals. And so then you think about, well, which level of the system do you want to change? And I think that's really a matter of personal taste. As I've talked with different people, sometimes people really love changing the system at the very local level, the neighborhood level, or the city level. And I've just felt like I wanted to change it higher up. And actually, I feel like I would want to change the system at that higher national level, except for I like Charlottesville. So I want to stay here. So that's why I'm working at changing the system level. So anyway, that's what this is about. So I work at the Nature Conservancy, and at our state chapter, we have a national chapter, and we have state chapters, and of course we have chapters in other countries. And as our state chapter is trying to figure out, how do we address climate change and how can we make an impact, you know, we can't do everything. And basically, when it comes to climate action, everything needs to be done all at once, everywhere. So we kind of had to figure out, well, where can we make an impact? And we had to look at, what are other environmental groups doing already? We want to do something that adds to what they're doing without just echoing what they're doing. And, you know, where are the gaps? So one of the places that we found was energy efficiency. And one of the reasons we like energy efficiency is because the cleanest energy is the energy that's never generated. It reduces all the impacts on nature from the power sector. And when I say energy efficiency, I mean using technology to achieve the same performance while using less energy. And I say that because a lot of times people think that energy efficiency means sitting in the cold and the dark and being really uncomfortable. But energy efficiency just means, like, using LEDs instead of incandescent bulbs, or, you know, replacing your furnace with a heat pump, or something much lower tech like just putting more insulation in your attic, and then you're saving a bunch of money on your energy bill and you're reducing the pollution from electricity. So the really great thing in terms of energy efficiency is that it's great for the environment and it's great for the economy. It employs so many people because people have to go into building after building to install these measures. These are jobs that cannot be exported. And it also is helping people save money on their energy bills. So this is triple win. So it's easy to advocate for in a lot of ways. It's also hard to advocate for because people say, well, if energy efficiency is so great, then why isn't it already being done? Like maybe people don't want to be energy efficient. Maybe there's not that much wasted energy. There's a lot of wasted energy. So the barriers are the upfront costs. It's a really smart investment to make your home more energy efficient, but there are upfront costs. There's lack of information. If landlords aren't paying energy bills, they don't have an incentive to make their buildings more energy efficient. Home builders don't pay energy bills, so they don't have a reason to make the homes they're building more energy efficient. They just want to make them cheap. And then, of course, our utility companies are monopolies. And the way that our system is structured is that these utility companies get more profit from selling more electricity and building more power plants. So they are not incentivized to help their customers be more energy efficient. So these are all areas that we're working on at the state level to help change the policies to address all of these barriers. And that leads us to RGGI. So we love RGGI. Now, Diane said that this group was probably familiar with RGGI, but RGGI stands for the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative that several states are in together, and Virginia joined it a couple years ago. And it's a really smart policy for reducing carbon emissions from the power sector. And it also generates money for the states. And each state gets to decide how they spend that money. And Virginia's legislation that got Virginia to join RGGI also determined how Virginia would spend the money earned from RGGI. And I really like how Virginia decided to spend that money. Half of it goes to energy efficiency for programs for low-income households, and half goes to money to localities to help them be more resilient against flooding. And there's an emphasis on nature-based solutions to flooding. Those are things like, using ecosystems to soak up excess water. And so my work is really focused on bringing awareness to the importance of the energy efficiency programs for the low-income households. That gets to that upfront cost for people who never could afford these energy efficiency improvements to their home otherwise. And if RGGI goes away, there is no replacement for those funds. So let's talk about RGGI going away. Because you may have heard that Governor Youngkin doesn't like RGGI. And so he basically made sure that he appointed people to the Air Board who would vote to repeal RGGI. And so that's what they did this summer. They did that in June. And then, or July, sorry, I can't see that part of the screen now because I see us there. Yeah, so then what happened is to make it official, it had to be in the Virginia Registrar. And once it was published there, that was kind of like the step that was needed for the Southern Environmental Law Center to say, hey, we're going to sue you. We're going to sue the Virginia administration for withdrawing from RGGI. And the reason they said that was because Southern Environmental Law Center is saying you can't make an administrative decision to pull out of RGGI. This has to be a decision that is made through legislation. We got in through legislation. We can only get out through legislation. And that's the argument that is being made in court. And so now this is in the courts, and we'll see. I don't know the timeline for this, but I do know that Virginia is contracted to be in RGGI through the end of 2023. And we'll see what happens after that. We had our quarterly auction in September that brought in an additional $73 million from selling allowances to polluting power plants to pollute carbon. And that's $73 million that is going to go again to energy efficiency programs for low-income households and localities to be more resilient against floods that are going to increase as climate change gets worse. So I want to stop there and see if you all have any questions about RGGI or energy efficiency or anything like that.
Hey, Lena.
Yeah.
How does the IRA funding for energy efficiency programs compare to RGGI funding?
That's a good question. We do have quite a lot of funding from the IRA. It's not as much. It's not as much. For one thing, some of it is a one-time funding or one-time fund. Like we have some funding from an increase in the federal weatherization assistance program. And that's great. That's a big help, but it's not as much as RGGI brings in. And in addition, some of the RGGI funds are being used to help get these homes in a state that makes them eligible for the federal funds. So we can't even use some of those federal funds until we get the homes in good enough repair for them. And so RGGI is a way to do that. So just to add a level of complexity there. Good question.
Lena, do you know how many people are being employed, like the number of jobs that were created just from the RGGI funds?
Yeah, it's a little hard to say. And we've tried to collect that information, but one of the challenges is that, you know, here we have millions of dollars for energy efficiency programs, and those then go through the Department of Community and Housing Development. Okay, great. That doesn't mean that that department is suddenly ready to handle distributing millions of dollars. And those funds then are meant to go to various nonprofits that are weatherization nonprofits. Well, so picture nonprofits around the state, they're not necessarily equipped to handle an influx of millions of dollars and suddenly put that to use. All of that's to say, the money is being used very, very slowly. And to answer your question, that means that the number of jobs created so far is not as great as it really could be because the money is trickling out, which is in and of itself a problem, that the money is trickling out.
Yeah, thanks.
I have a question.
Yeah, Diane.
So, I mean, I guess the fact that we just joined RGGI not too long ago, the infrastructure really isn't set up for, as you said, that's why there's a slowing. I guess that makes sense. I guess my other question is, how are we assured that the industry or the power company isn't just raising the rates on the consumer in order to pay for this amount that they have to pay into RGGI?
We're not assured. So
Yes.
The way that it is written right now, it is possible for our electric companies to pass. So the way that it works is that for each ton of carbon that the power plants emit, they have to purchase an allowance from the state. And so the more pollution they put out, the more allowances they have to buy. And what Diane is saying is, are they passing the cost of those allowances on to their customers, their ratepayers? The answer is yes, they are. For the average ratepayer, that's, I think, somewhere between $2 and $4 a month. So I would say a few things to that. One is, for most of us, how much does that actually matter? For many of us, would we be willing to pay that much money for the good that it does? But then to solve that problem, I would say there's a few solutions. One is our state corporation commission has the power to decide whether those costs get passed on to customers, and so far they have. Another possibility is that legislation could get passed to say you can't pass the cost of these pollution allowances to your customers. And a third possibility is that they could pollute less, and then they'd be passing on less cost to their customers.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything else on Reggie?
I just might add that maybe we should all bear the cost of putting carbon in the atmosphere too.
Yeah, I mean, that's a consideration too. So, moving on then to electric vehicles. Why does the Nature Conservancy of all organizations talk about electric vehicles? When we looked at where the carbon emissions in our state were coming from, it didn't take too much digging to find out that half of our carbon emissions in Virginia come from transportation sector. And when you break down in the transportation sector where this carbon emission is coming from, it's from personal vehicles, technically light duty vehicles. And that means our cars, our SUVs, and our pickup trucks. And when you take all those personal vehicles and you add them up together, they are emitting more carbon dioxide than all of our power plants in the state. And so that's a problem that we need to handle, we need to deal with if we're going to figure out how to be a low carbon society. And so, there's a couple of things we need to do, and they're challenging. We need to reduce personal vehicle miles traveled. And really, we need to figure out how to lower our vehicle miles traveled by at least 20%. And that's to hit our Paris climate goals. And the state really doesn't have a plan for that. That's hard. That really comes down to local work on zoning, on making cities walkable and bikeable, and to increase transit and all of those things. So again, thinking about those layers of those circles earlier, that's a lot of city work. And then the remaining vehicle miles need to be electrified as fast as possible. So to get to, I forget who was talking about this earlier, in terms of like, should you get an electric vehicle? So this is a site that I have had a lot of fun nerding out with. This is carboncounter.com. This was made by MIT. And you can go to this site and you can compare any two vehicles that you like. Or you compare many vehicles. You can choose more than two. So I chose two Konas, one that's electric and one that is regular gas-powered vehicle. And you can see that their sticker prices are very far apart. So you might look at these and say, oh my gosh, this is so expensive. I can't afford this. But if you look at their cost over their total lifetime, like you break it down, like what's my cost per month? And so if you look at the legend over here in the reds, if it includes your maintenance, your fuel and electricity, and the cost of the vehicle. And that's over here. So one is the electric and two is the gas powered. The costs break down to be about even. And that's because the fuel costs and the maintenance costs of the gas car are more. And then you say, well, what's the impact of the carbon emissions? And one of the things I like about this site is that it includes the carbon emissions of the battery production, because battery production is very energy intensive. And it also includes the carbon emission of the fuel, whether that fuel is electricity or gas. And so here again, this is the electric and this is the gas powered. And so EVs are reducing carbon emissions in this case by 53%. So that's a really huge reduction. And that's why we're supporting electric vehicles. And so just to go over a couple of bills that we've worked on. One was, yeah.
Thank you. So I want to make sure I understand this. So in the chart on the left, this is overall cost over what period of time?
So this is essentially, you can consider this the total lifetime cost, and then it's like broken down per month. So this is
Okay.
saying that per month, these are each going to cost you a little under $400 per month, on average. Obviously, you're going to pay more upfront when you buy the vehicle. But if you were to even it out over, how much are you paying per month on average over the total lifetime of the vehicle, it's going to average out to about $400 a month.
Okay. And then the one on the right is just the carbon footprint, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you tell us what the taxes and fees are and why those are different?
Let's see. I'm trying to remember, but I think that in Virginia, because I set this to be Virginia, EVs have a higher registration fee, so that's probably what that is. Yeah, because
Pay
EVs,
$125
Yeah.
extra a year because we have a Volkswagen EV.
yeah,
compared to the
because
others.
EVs pay nothing in gas tax, our state makes us make up for that with a higher registration fee.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So how we are doing advocating at the state level, this was a bill that requires the state to consider that total cost of ownership when the state procures vehicles, and the state procures thousands of vehicles. So they have to compare the total cost of ownership of a regular gas car to an EV. And when they do that, if the EV costs less, the state has to buy the EV instead of the gas-powered car. This bill passed 100% unanimously, bipartisan support. So I was very, very pleased about that one. And another one that we have worked on that is really important in terms of getting more electric vehicles on the road in Virginia is the Clean Car Standard. This was passed in 21, and I'm excited that goes into effect in 24, upcoming year. This increases the targets for EV sales in Virginia, and it goes up little by little every year. Manufacturers are already meeting the targets for next year now. But what it does is that it's going to get more models of EVs to the dealers in Virginia because manufacturers prioritize sending electric vehicles to the clean car states over other states. So anyway, that's one that has been controversial and one that we'll work on defending. But anyway, excited that it's finally going to take effect next year. So anyway, any other questions on electric vehicles before moving on to federal opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, there were several attempts to repeal that, weren't there, in the General Assembly last year, and they're fairly close.
Yeah, there were several attempts. I lost count of the number of bills, but they all got rolled into one bill in the Senate and one bill in the House to repeal the Clean Car Standards. And both bills were killed in committee. And then I think there was one more attempt to add in I forget how that worked, but maybe it was a budget amendment that required a floor vote, which meant that everybody had to vote on it. And that got killed as well.
So are you going to move on from electric vehicles now in your presentation, or?
That's my plan, unless you want to keep talking about it.
No, just sort of a brief question. I read that the federal government is devoting over or around $10 billion for hydrogen fuel plant projects around the country. Has there been any interest or anything in Virginia? I know that there's a big plant, a hydrogen producing plant going in Montgomery County that's going to fuel their transit system.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I know that there were collaborations working on applying for those grants, and I don't remember who ended up being the final teams who submitted grants where. But I think there were at least a couple in Virginia that applied for those hydrogen grants. Hydrogen hub grants. So we'll see what happens with those. Yeah, and I think the thing with hydrogen to keep in mind is that how clean it is really depends on how it's produced. If it is produced using natural gas, it's not necessarily getting us ahead in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. It also really depends on what it's used for. If it is used in an industry that is otherwise hard to
Electrified.
hard to electrify, yeah, then that's probably a win. Like if we're talking about like long haul heavy duty vehicles, that might be a place to use it. If we're using hydrogen in our light duty vehicles that we could otherwise electrify, that's not the best place for it. So I think we've got to be very judicious about how it's produced and how it's used. And so far, I'm concerned that that's not being taken into account strongly enough.
No, the Montgomery project is on-site generation using solar, I believe,
Well, that sounds good.
for the electrolysis.
Yeah, I think that's really critical.
Speaking of which, I just had a question about the calculator. When they look at the carbon output, they're thinking about that's specific to Virginia and how electricity is generated in Virginia today. Okay.
You can set it up that way. When you go to that calculator,
Yeah.
it has general like national average settings, or you can go in and set it to your particular state or whatever settings you want.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's fun to geek out with.
Hi, Lena, I
Okay.
have a question.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering in Virginia, I would assume in the big cities there'll be high rise and skyscrapers. Because in Malaysia, the main city, we facing this problem when we are encouraging more EV adoption. Because most of the mid-income families or people stay in high rise, and the charger is the problem, right? Like, one unit, hundreds of people. How do we share just 10 chargers? So I'm wondering how is it done in Virginia? Maybe you can share some example of systems or any legislation to regulate this. Thank you.
Yeah, that is a good question, and we need to get there. We are just in the beginning stages of electric vehicles here. Malaysia may be ahead of us, I don't know. But in terms of apartment buildings, multi-story buildings, multi-family housing, I think that we're going to have a lot of adjustment to make in terms of getting EV chargers put into those parking lots. And so what I'm hoping is that a lot of those building owners are going to see the opportunity to put them in to attract tenants. But I think that we are going to need legislation to mandate some of that. And I think that we're going to need building codes to regulate some of that as well. Yeah, but it's really important because like there's a lot of people that need to be included in that electrification that live in these apartment buildings, and there's a lot of details to consider to make sure that they have access to those chargers and they're not charged a whole bunch of money to charge their vehicles. That they have access to affordable charging the same way that someone who owns a single family home can just plug in at their regular rate.
Thank you.
Yeah, Tom.
I have a question, or I guess it's something I've kind of wondered about. If you look around Charlottesville and beyond, you can't miss the number of people, for example, who zoom around now on little scooters. And then you have electric bicycles, which are really very capable in many ways now as means of transportation. And I sort of wonder sometime, well, could you have like things like little micro cars with electric motors? They could be pretty high performance, and people could use them to come. They live out in the countryside. They could get commute in and out. I would think, pretty comfortably. Is there any move to kind of get sort of small scale electric vehicles into the mix? Because I'm sure they'd use a lot less energy and pollute vastly less than your average piston engine SUV, for example, or even less than an EV SUV.
Yeah, I think electric bikes are gaining popularity, and they are really good at kind of replacing short-term trips, car trips. And I don't know about small cars; those haven't been very successful at winning people over. But I think like the cool electric bikes, not bikes. I'm thinking of like what's the equivalent of electric motorbike? I don't know what you call that.
An e-bike.
Yeah, but not like an e-bike, but like an e-motorcycle.
Oh, e-motorcycle. I guess an
Yeah.
e-motorcycle.
An electric motorcycle. I know that those are out there, that they might have a cool factor to them. Yeah, I think those are really important alternatives. Yeah.
Yeah, I was recently traveling in the northern US and southern Canada, and I saw a lot of electric scooters that people were using. And I was not used to seeing them, but that seems to me a very effective new transportation idea.
Yeah. Sometimes I don't know a lot about like what kind of safety measures are needed to make sure that the riders of those are well protected. But yeah, I think that they're a really important part of just alternate mobility to the conventional car. And that's the way to reduce those. When we talk about reducing our personal vehicle miles travel, that counts as a reduction. So I'm just wondering if anybody has an answer to this question on the screen now. If you have any, aspirational projects you would install locally if money were no obstacle.
Well, I live like halfway between Scottsville and Charlottesville, and there's just a lot of traffic, people coming in from Buckingham County up that corridor, and just like if there was multiple buses that were free that ran like between that could transport people to UVA and these places where people are driving into. I know that there is a bus that somebody was saying, it doesn't, the hours aren't quite right. And maybe if there were more, that's my idea.
Yeah.
I was kind of wondering about going a little more heavy duty even. Years ago, there was a lot of talk about creating light rail, for example, between Crozet and Charlottesville. And it wasn't economically viable, I don't think, but since you said it's not a matter of money here, I was wondering what about putting electric trains that ran, say, from Crozet to Charlottesville and up 29 and maybe down south to Scottsville. I mean, I used to live in England for a year in the South Coast, and I mean, you could just electric trains ran frequently, and you just get on a train and you'd be in London, in a couple of hours, and you'd spend the day there and come right back. And people were, the British, they used to either little cars or no cars, or at least back then. And I mean, when I was a kid growing up in New Orleans, we didn't have a car till I was 13. You just took a bus or a cab. And I guess what I'm wondering is, could you even shift the mentality? If you don't need a certain ridership to pay it off quickly, could you shift the mentality where people in Crozet and so on would hop public transportation that was quick and clean and took you, 29 or Charlottesville or wherever, and you could do your stuff and come back in the evening?
So these are the kinds of things that I don't know if this is what the federal money can pay for, but what I think is that the more you have these ideas already in your head, the more likely it is that you will find a federal program that's coming out of the Inflation Reduction Act that fits it. And, you will probably have to do a lot of advocating to the local governments to say, like, this is what we should pitch, but this is the kind of dreaming I think we need to be doing to make these things happen. And so so there's a lot of federal programs, and as I've been hearing about them, it's like, oh my gosh, like billions of dollars is like, and billions of programs, it's like too much. So I've been sorting through it, and I just keep thinking a lot of it in terms of like, what can I do with it? A lot of it seems to be at the local level. A lot of it seems to be going towards state government. And so I was trying to pick out some things that might be something that folks working at the local level might be able to pick up and run with. I don't know. So I just picked a few things. I don't know, and this might be too many. And so I'll try to go through them, and I'll share these slides with you later too, so that obviously I don't expect you to like remember all this now. But 4 things I want to go through that I think might be something that you could advocate for locally. Yeah, maybe or maybe not. But anyway, here they are. And I'll just say, like, this is the area that I feel more wobbly on than the other stuff I was talking about. So I do not feel like I can say with total confidence that everything I'm saying from here on out is correct. So follow up and verify on your own. So anyway, these are the 4 areas. Like I'll go through them each on their own. The first one, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, is a green bank, which means it's a loan, and so it has to be paid back. It's not a grant, right? But a green bank then would provide loans for things that would reduce greenhouse gases. And a green bank would presumably do it at a lower interest rate than a traditional bank. So it's going to make it easier to pay back. So this green bank, the amazing thing is all of these billions of dollars have to be distributed by the end of next September. So they're like, get the money out the door. And they've got it in 3 different categories. The National Clean Investment Fund is funding clean technology projects. So if you have a clean technology project that you've always wanted to do, and you have a way that you could pay a loan back, the applications are due in about a month, exactly a month. But, see what you can pull together. Or if you know of somebody else who might make use of such a thing, this might be for them. There's the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator, and this is for boosting financing capacity in low-income and disadvantaged communities so that they can finance clean energy projects. So again, don't know if that like sparks any light bulbs for you, but there's that. And then the Solar for All, this is something that if Cville100 hasn't been engaged with yet, there's actually an ask right now. So the Virginia Department of Energy, which goes by Virginia Energy, is asking for assistance with this grant. This is a grant to expand the number of low-income and disadvantaged community that have access to rooftop solar and community solar. And Virginia Energy is applying for this grant on behalf of, I guess, Virginia. And what they need are letters of support by organizations. So if Cville100 wanted to submit a letter of support on behalf of this grant to the EPA, the letters are due, Virginia's asking for them by September 19th, which is obviously really soon. They have a template to make it easier. And also, if you are part of any other organizations that could help with that letter of support, that would be, the more the better. So that's one. Second one is...
Lena, I'm sorry, could you go back 2 slides?
Yeah.
Yeah. So on all of these, do you have any sense of what the loan terms are, length of time and interest rates?
No, I think you're going to have to go to the website. If you just search Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund EPA, you'll get there. And
Sure.
look at the details. Yeah. Second thing that might be worth, if you happen to know a local, transit authority that you wish would get some zero emission transit buses, the next round of competitive grants for these buses will open up next calendar year. So that might be something that you might want to start talking about with whatever local agency might be relevant.
This is this is
yeah.
this is the hot topic right now because the CAT is making a determination on the alternative fuels study that's going to basically determine their purchasing of vehicles for the next 15 years or so.
Wow. Okay.
And by all indications, it appears that compressed natural gas is the leading candidate for their buses.
That's a shame. I got to say, I'm not an expert in that area, but yeah, obviously, I would favor electric vehicles over compressed natural gas. But I haven't seen that study, so
It's supposed to be released in mid-October.
okay. All right. Third one, this is called the direct pay provision. And the problem that it solves is that, there's tax credits for various things like solar installations. You can get a 30% tax credit on a solar installation, and that's great if you pay taxes. But if you're a nonprofit, you don't pay taxes. And a nonprofit organization, a church, a private school, there's lots of nonprofits out there. And also local governments don't pay taxes, which means that all these tax credits don't help these organizations save money on solar, and so they haven't gone solar. So the direct pay solves that. The way that these organizations have been working around this so far is that they pay a private company, the private company installs the solar and then passes some of the savings on to the nonprofit, but it's this whole kind of workaround, and the direct pay eliminates the workaround. The way that it does that is the direct pay is the federal government directly pays the nonprofit or directly pays the local government the refund for the 30% tax credit that they didn't get. So this is really big news in some circles and really good to know about, if you happen to be a member of a local school or church or synagogue that wanted to go solar before and couldn't figure out how. Maybe now you can. And the last one I wanted to point out has to do with tax credits and rebates for homeowners. I just grabbed this screenshot from Rewiring America, which is, I think, a really great site, but they have a savings calculator. And, as much as I work on energy efficiency because of its benefits for climate, I end up talking about the financial benefits of it way more than I talk about the benefits to the planet. And this is one of those cases. So I think that there's just a role for advocates to play in getting the word out to homeowners that there's a ton of money to save on energy efficient improvements to our homes right now. So if anybody, is about to replace any of their appliances, they can save money on getting a more energy efficient appliance. So that the more expensive energy efficient appliance is gonna, turn out to be equally cheap as the less efficient appliance. And then they start saving money on their energy bill. And then there's also rebates that are going to come into effect next year. And then this Rewiring America site also has this calculator you can start entering your own information into and start doing some calculating. So, if you feel like there's a role for you to play and just kind of like cheerleading for homeowner savings, I think more people need to know about it. Yeah, Tom.
I'm just pleased to see the heat pumps, the geothermal heat pumps up there. It's always seemed to me that they're maybe undervalued, or maybe I'm wrong about it, but it seems to me that, they use subsoil temperatures for both heating and cooling. And if we're in a world that's getting warmer, the fact that they heat and cool seems to me to be a really big bonus. So it seems like, there can be limits to how much solar electricity you can generate, but it seems to me, geothermal heat pumps are an active system, so they take electricity. to run, but there's such a big payoff. It seems to me a sort of maybe optimal combo for, say, a lot of homes, especially if you're in these large lot subdivisions that most people hate. But one benefit is they've got a lot of lawn just sitting there. You could put geothermal heat pumps with these heat exchangers out in the great big lawns, and then put in some solar panels to provide energy to offset the consumption of the geothermal. And that might be all around a really powerful package as far as cutting energy use for a household.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the kind of possibility that these rebates and tax credits are designed to get you thinking about. And geothermal, I agree, does seem to have a lot of potential. And my uncle just did that, and I'm not sure that a lot of people can afford that cost, and I'm not sure about the payoff. But
Well, that's why, yeah, you
yeah.
have 30% of the cost. That's why I'm
Maybe
saying it's a lot of money.
that's right. Maybe that's what will be the tipping point. Yeah.
Something to share. Not really a question, but on the last part about incentives for household in Malaysia, because general public don't like to visit government website unless they have to pay tax or lodge a complaint. And so what the government did is they worked with the e-commerce platform, like eBay and Amazon equivalent in Malaysia, to just flash out like, hi guys, we have incentive for energy efficiency household appliances, please apply by when and when. I think that might be something that Virginia state can consider. Yeah, just thinking out loud. Thank you.
I think that's really smart. Sorry, Christine. I do, because the government sites for the United States are really dry and hard to navigate too. And this rewiring site was one that I saw that seemed a little bit more regular person approachable.
Yeah, sometimes Lowe's, like the place where a lot of people buy appliances, we have like a tax holiday. Like there's a couple times a year for energy efficient. If you buy an energy efficient appliance, you don't have to pay Virginia tax. I think that seems like I participated in that, but it is helpful because you get the advertising for the people who are selling you these appliances, and you're more likely to see it there.
I have another question on cars, unless Lena, you're going to talk more about cars.
Go for it.
Okay. So, the tax law that we have has an amazing number of caveats in it. You don't just go out and buy whatever electric car and get a $7,400 tax credit, right? It has to be a vehicle. I forget all the rules, but I think like one of the biggest ones is that it has to have certain parts or number of parts made in the United States. Anyway, are any of those laws changing between 2023 and 24? Should we wait to 24 to purchase an EV vehicle to get the maximum tax rebate? How does all that work?
That is a good question. I don't know, because it's too complicated. I can't keep track. Yeah, I know there's a couple of sites that are keeping track of which cars are eligible, but that doesn't quite answer your question of will things get better in 24. The only thing I do think is that manufacturers are catching up with the tax laws, and more and more vehicles will qualify for the full rebate as time goes on. So I think that's the main thing. You might find just what you want now that qualifies for the full $7,500 rebate now. I think you just need to be very careful as you go to make sure that you're buying one that does. And there are a couple of sites. I'll send a follow-up email and I'll include those sites that will say like which vehicles qualify now.
I found it interesting that you get a used electric vehicle and you get a rebate, which
We just bought a demo model and they called it used and we did not get the rebate. So I'm not sure if you get the rebate for used.
Oh, it's a tax credit.
Oh,
Yeah, so when you file your taxes for this year, make sure that you
oh,
that you note that you got a used EV this year.
really?
Yeah, yeah. We got an EV last year and we almost forgot to note that. That was
Oh my gosh. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
I do have a question while I'm speaking to Lena. I just wonder, when you look at the number, like the numbers of the energy costs from, you compared the personal vehicles to the business vehicles, I'm wondering how the homes compare with the personal vehicle miles traveled with consumption of electricity. And how that all, like, I mean, is it really difficult to find? Like, I had tried Googling it a while ago because the Sierra Club had sent some request for comment about proposing changes to like heat. It was heat, your water heater, the type of heat pump water heater, but they didn't have any details as far as like how much energy consumption would really be saved.
So I'm not quite sure I understand the comparison you're asking for about the homes.
The
Like,
use
with the-
of
yeah.
the energy consumed from personal vehicles versus personal homes,
Oh, okay.
like CO2 emissions. I'm just wondering, you said we have to reduce our vehicles by 20%.
Okay. I want to find another.
Or is that too off topic? Because I can just.
No, I have a chart that might kind of answer that, but it's just going to take me a second to pull it up.
I'm just wondering, do we have to look at everything? In other words, do we have to consider everything when we're reducing energy, or is it we're going to focus on cars, or we're going to focus on homes, or we're going to focus on business?
Yeah.
Let me comment that Albemarle County does a greenhouse emission inventory every few years, and there was one published but a couple of years ago, I guess, and it has a kind of attempt to assign different percents, the correct percents of greenhouse gas emissions to various kinds of uses and sectors. So there are some estimates of how things, transportation, houses, and I think commercial sector in different ways and so on. So there is some existing efforts to, I think, answer the question.
If I recall correctly, building emissions in Albemarle County exceed transportation emissions actually by a small percentage. So it's a big percentage actually of emissions.
That might be when we include all buildings. So this is for households. So it doesn't necessarily, and this is for an average Charlottesville family. This is dated from a couple of years ago, so it probably hasn't changed that much. So average Charlottesville household is, like 2.6 people or something like that. And so that's almost 30 tons of carbon emissions per year. And your question was like electricity versus vehicles. And this outlines up, right? We are emitting more carbon dioxide from our vehicles than from electricity in the average household. Now, if we switch to electric vehicles, that's going to increase the electricity, but it's not going to go up as much from the electricity as it's going to come down from the vehicles. And obviously this carbon footprint varies greatly by household, but this is the average household.
Thank you. That's
All right.
I would just like to make a comment that Lena she authored or co-authored a chapter in the 2024 Our Common Agenda booklet produced by the Virginia Conservation Network. And the material she's talked about on energy efficiency was definitely detailed in that in that chapter in the booklet. So that's available online if you go to the VCN website.
Yeah, thanks for plugging that. There are a lot of individual short papers in that booklet that you can pick out individually based on whatever your favorite topics are in conservation, and so yeah, I recommend it as a good little brief on many different topics from a lot of advocates in our Virginia community.
And there's a focus on the potential for legislation in the General Assembly or efforts to either support or combat the executive on the state executive on various policies.
Yeah, that's right. It's meant to help people who want to talk to their state legislators kind of get some basic talking points about, you know, what we think are the main priorities for this coming year. So feel free to share with your state legislators.
Where can we find this?
Yeah, let me put that in the chat. Yeah, this is the Virginia VCNVA.org. But I'll get to their exact page if I can.
Well, you've this has made an impression on me about just the impact of transportation. It's always good to like really see the numbers and to see how impactful driving the car is. And I've been watching, with the school bus shortage, and if you're ever there on the pickup line around any of the public schools during pickup or drop off, there's a lot of cars lined up. We've got kids coming to school in those personal vehicles. So, yeah.
Yeah, also what Peter mentioned, like it's very, very relevant topic, this replacing the buses for CAT in Charlottesville. Like right now, they're in the process of making that decision. So I don't know, I guess we all need to write more letters, and Lena, maybe we can get you to write a letter to City Council also, because they're going to be making the decision about whether to go with the natural gas buses or electric buses. And yeah, so
Yeah,
maybe we can be in touch with that and kind of give you some information that we've collected. And if if any of you all in your network want to support the electric buses, that'd be great. Yeah. Okay.
okay. Yeah, I'm trying to think of other organizations that would be more on top of that than I am in terms of like that specific question of why natural gas is not as good as electric. All I know
Charlottesville
is
350 has put out has a number of research, basically articles that they've pulled together.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
And C3 is launching a petition.
Good. I was thinking of them.
And they actually, I think they have a webinar scheduled for. It's been changed. It was supposed to be this Thursday, but now I think it's being moved to the 26th of this month. And I think
Yes.
they'll probably be like a noon webinar.
Yeah, comparing different fuel sources, hydrogen and electricity and like natural gas.
Yeah, one of the things that it irks me a bit about the arguments for natural gas is that they are framing it as, oh, it's not going to be, natural gas supplied through the usual supply chain. It's going to be renewable natural gas produced from, capturing methane from landfills and animal manure lagoons. And there are tons of questions about that approach.
Well,
Yeah.
well, that is a good battle to be fighting, and I just want to be conscientious of our time, and I want to thank you, Lena, for coming and presenting and giving us all this good information and things to think about. And thank you to everybody who has joined to listen in. I found it to be very insightful and a lot to chew on.
Thank you all for coming. And
Thank you.
Thank you.
yeah, like I said, I will follow up with some links for everybody.
And hopefully we can have you back for another one of our meetings as we talk about this. We'd love that.
Thanks.
Thank
All right.
you.
Thank
Mhm.
you, Lena.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Have a
Bye,
great
everybody.
week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.